St. Louis sports fans, go deeper with STL Sports Central Insiders. Get exclusive access to Bernie, Randy, Claves, Jamal Mayers, and more. Plus, your chance to watch a Blues game in the alumni box with Jamal himself. Monthly giveaways, Bernie's columns all week, and support for local sports media. Join now at stlsportscentral.com. On Friday, the Cardinals made 4 roster moves to get their 40-man down to 37 players. And I think we got a good one for you today here on Card Central 365. Joe Roderick, Brenden Schaeffer with you here. And Brenden, you and I, when this news came out Friday night, started texting about it to the point where we had to stop texting each other to save it for the show. And as we get ready to get into things here on this edition of the show, brought to you as always by DraftKings Sportsbook, where the crown is yours. So here you go. The Cardinals decided not to tender the 2026 contracts of 4 players. One, Jorge Alcala, which we knew about the other day.
Right.
And left-handed pitcher John King, catcher Yohel Pozo, and your guy Sem Robberse, the relief pitcher.
Is he my guy because I'm the only one that can pronounce his name? Is that why he's considered
my
guy?
Oh yeah, he's your guy. Yeah, him and Tekoa Roby are your guys. And
you can say his name.
You've also become a Kyle Leahy guy. I think that's who you're most attached to now after the 2025 season.
Okay,
so I think that's who you've hitched your wagon to with that. But let's the Sem news, the Alcala news, it's whatever. We knew it. We've talked about it. That's those two I think are what?
We didn't know that Sem Robberse, by the way, it is Robberse, was going to be non-tendered, but having another guy on your 40-man roster who is still recovering from Tommy John and was not particularly effective before the surgery, that was a squeeze that is not very surprising to me. You got fired up about at least one of these roster moves, though, because the text conversation was such that I wasn't surprised by any of these, but there was one in particular that you were really fired up about.
I was surprised about 2 of them. I was surprised about John King, and I was surprised about Yohel Pozo. I will start with John King because I think this conversation is a lot shorter. And I think in the end of the day, I don't think it matters as much. But what I will continue to harp on all off season until we see the arms that are available at spring training is that the Cardinals have, if you look at any baseball season, have about 1,400 innings that you have to cover through the span of that season. John King was a guy who was on the big league roster when he was healthy all of 2025 and pitched all of 2025 on a big league roster. I just, in a season that you are going into and you are saying, hey, look, it's a rebuilding year, I think you keep the arms that you know can pitch at a big league level, regardless, good or bad, because you're already saying we don't care if we're not out here to win games. So why does it matter? Why does performance matter at the end of the day?
Well, because they never said that. I heard we're not conceding anything, and teams who aren't conceding anything don't trot John King out, who had a 4.66 ERA last year. And if you look at the MLB trade rumors projections, which it's not the Bible, but it's a pretty good gauge, the dude's in arbitration. He was due to earn an estimate of $2.1 million. No, John King is not worth $2.1 million as a part of the Cardinal bullpen in 2026. Like, that's really the full conversation. If he were one of those guys making, what's the major league minimum these days? It used to be 573, whatever it is now. If he were making that, sure, why not? But he's not. He's making 3 times that, at least, in the estimate of what his arbitration earnings would have been. So this was an easy cut that it was only a matter of when, not if. Like, he was not going to be offered a contract in the arbitration process with the production that he had last year. It just was very underwhelming. This was, if you could get John King on a rookie deal, that's who's going to fill that spot. I don't know who that guy is today, but it's not going to be John King because he was making too much money.
And yes, and again, the performance to me, it doesn't matter. I know what you're hearing, But what you're hearing, what you're being told, and what your eyes kind of look at out there at what the roster is going to be. Again, is this going to be what you imagine to be an 86 win team?
I do not predict 86 wins for the Cardinals.
Okay.
Vegas last year said 76.5. They ended up, what are they? They get over that, I think. I forget the final win total, but they were underwhelming, right? This year, I bet you the win totals from Vegas is going to be 72.5 or whatever it's going to be. And they'll be over or under it, and it'll be what it is, and they'll be short of the playoffs. Like, that's generally our expectations. We have a full offseason yet to pursue before we know, lock in the predictions. But that's generally the way we all think this thing's going to go. That being said, should not the reason enough be $2.1 million John King isn't a good investment no matter who you are? No offense to John King, but like, you can find John King's production from a source that is more affordable than that.
I get what you're saying. I think Big League Arms again.
You get that I'm right? I
just think Big League Arms. It's you're going to go out there and you're going to overpay on an Andre Pallante probably in arbitration than what
he's a starter though.
But again, a starter who struggled to get through 4 a lot of times last year.
No doubt about it. And that's why I've talked about Andre Pallante not being a lock for your rotation. But I think this is a very different circumstance. If you want to tell me that, and I'll pull up Pallante's numbers from last year. I know they weren't great, but at the end of it all, he still did log 162 innings. Not saying he should be patted on the back for that. He had a 5.31 ERA. But I would argue that if your argument is innings, Andre Pallante's 160 innings, do you have a better chance of filling them by just throwing and I'll look, I've got the projections up right here. For Pallante, they estimate on Trade Rumors 3.4 million. That's a hefty number as well. I've talked about all offseason that I'm not guaranteeing Pallante's in the rotation because I don't know that he's even going to be given that, tendered that contract. Obviously, today, he wasn't announced as somebody who was being non-tendered. I think that deadline's coming up. So tells you that they're going to go through the back and forth and he's going to get a number. 3 million, whatever it ends up being. And it's potentially an overpay if he gives you the same production from this year. But I don't think it's even in the same league, in the same conversation as volunteering to pay John King $2 million to give you 40 to 50 innings of 5 ERA out of the bullpen as a left-hander. That is more replaceable from the outside, not even with a free agent contract, but just, I don't know, you bring in a lefty on a minor league deal and he ends up making $700K and probably can produce those numbers. I'm not saying that you're guaranteed to get that because we're probably underselling the degree to which anybody can roll out of bed and have a 4.5 ERA in the big leagues. But I think it's a lot more difficult, probably something they could still try to do, and they should, to go out and sign a $3 million starting pitcher that can produce what Andre Pallante is expected to produce, baking in that Pallante still has the notion of upside because the previous season he was a pretty good starter.
So that's, again, the John King discussion. We might get into it a little more on tomorrow's show, especially when you add in Andre Pallante, because we're going to be talking Sonny Gray on Sunday for that episode. By the way, as I'm scrolling through the list of names throughout all of baseball, another former Cardinal listed on here, along with a few big ones we'll get to at the end of the show. But Roderick Munoz was also non-tendered by the Reds. On November 21st, he was claimed off waivers by the Reds on November 6th. So
this just happened a couple weeks ago.
The 15-day Roderick Munoz experiment in Cincinnati is.
They must have hated that guy. I mean, good grief. No, these are the things that happen in all seriousness.
It is, but it's just
you take a flyer.
To see a 15-day.
I know. In November.
Yeah.
You take a flyer, and then you need a roster spot, and so no more flyer. That happens in baseball.
So the one that I want to get to is the decision to non-tender Yohel Pozo. We will get to that. Before we get to that, I am just going to remind everybody that coming up on December 1st, 10 days from now, that is when the DraftKings Sportsbook goes live in Missouri. Use promo code STL Sports and get $300 off of your first $5 bet, $300 in bonus bets when you use promo code STL Sports. With the DraftKings Sportsbook, you can go on there now and create your account, and you can get that all up and running for launch day on December 1st. In partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 21 and over. Physically present in Missouri. Eligibility and restrictions apply. Subject to regulatory licensing requirements. Bonus bets are non-withdrawable and expire 7 days after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos.
So Yohel Pozo was non-tendered by the Cardinals today. Brenden, you said was not a surprise at all in your
Correct.
mind. You talked about it on Tuesday that he didn't have a role on this roster, and that is where you and I are going to disagree on what the Cardinals are going to do at that catching position. And as of right now, the Cardinals don't know what they're going to do with the catching position for 2026. But as of November 22nd, it appears that they are going to go out there with Iván Herrera and Pedro Pagés as the two catchers that they are planning to see the most time behind the plate out there. And at this point, I think walking away and kind of letting Yohel Pozo go out there and be a free agent, I feel like that was a mistake at this moment for the Cardinal organization to do.
Why? I have to follow up. Why is that the wrong decision? Because like I said, I thought it was abundantly clear. I know that we were kind of going back and forth. Tuesday, as we were breaking down the situation with the 5 catchers, I think my comment was that if we're comparing Pozo and Pagés, the one that's obviously more expendable is Pozo because he basically is Herrera to a much lesser degree. Trust the bat, not really much to speak of behind the plate. But when you want to emphasize Herrera as a catcher, the complement to that needs to be somebody that you do trust defensively. And so that was my belief of why they would let Pozo go. I didn't go as far as to say it because that wouldn't be very nice, but it was not a surprise to me. You felt differently.
I feel differently because, as I said with the John King situation, you are going into this season to get to the finish line, and you are not expecting this team to compete for a postseason, which means if you are rebuilding, you are selling off pieces that you think you could get something in the future for. I have been part of discussions on other shows. I know we've talked about it on here with Pedro Pagés possibly being a guy that you can trade. You are not getting a top prospect back for Pedro Pagés if you trade him. I am very aware of that. You are not getting a team's top 5, top 10 prospect. In return for that, you are probably getting some low minor league, relief pitcher or a lottery ticket of sorts with a player, but you are getting something back in return for Pedro Pagés because Pedro Pagés has value on a lot of other teams as being a backup defensive catcher for a team that probably has a really good offensive first catcher. Pedro Pagés would be a good defensive backup in that situation. If Iván Herrera is adamant about catching, and there were videos the other day of him in his workouts and rehab assignments now that he is full on back in the gym working on being a catcher. If that is 4 out of 6 games a week that Iván Herrera is your catcher, do you need a defensive backup in that situation? Or are you just going with, as I mentioned on Tuesday's show, the combination of Yohel Pozo and Jimmy Crooks, and you're just there with your catcher position, hoping that Iván Herrera at the age of 25 takes off and becomes a major league caliber catcher that can go out there and be behind the plate 120 games a season. And in that situation, I feel like that's where, again, getting something back for a Pedro Pagés is more important to the future of this franchise than keeping him on the team and having him be a defensive backup.
I just give a really flawed premise. Like, what makes you believe that Pedro Pagés had all of this value that teams were attempting to give the Cardinals?
I'm not saying that he has all of this value. I'm just saying that he is if you are looking at assets you can trade off this offseason, I think that he is a person that if a team comes calling, you can go, yeah, you know what? You need this guy as a backup? Yeah. He's available. And teams I don't think are calling for we're calling for Pozo.
No, that's why you could just release him. Now, Jeff Jones did make this point in a tweet that by doing it this way, rather than a few days ago where you'd pass him through waivers, at the non-tender deadline, the guy just becomes a free agent. I'm sure the Cardinals like Yohel Pozo. They enjoyed having him around. And Jeff mentioned, wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't land another major league gig, that you could sign him back on a minor league contract, which, again, you get through spring training, there's a million catchers down there. You got to have them to get through the spring. So if nothing else, like, I think that would be a door that would certainly be open. And by doing it this way, he wasn't subjected to waivers where another team could claim him. Now, obviously, if those same teams that would have claimed him would like to sign him, they can certainly do so. But, this will at least give maybe that opportunity for the Cardinals to kind of circle back and say, hey, if nothing does materialize, we're still here. I just, because he had no value and you don't know what you're going to get out of Herrera, you're making the argument that a team that has an offensive first catcher could utilize Pagés as the backup. Why is that not the Cardinals? It's not that Pagés is like this player that's almost a free agency. He's not a free agent eligible player until like 2030 after that season. So he's a guy with a lot of team control who is still, I would say, developing in his role. He's not a young guy. He's not a prospect anymore. He's 27 years old, just turned 27. But that's a perfectly suitable backup to have around for the coming years, especially for this 2026 season, in which you are not for sure that Iván Herrera is going to be able to do it. Like you mentioned, Herrera catching 4 out of 6 games this year. I just did the math, 162 times 66%. That would imply like 108 starts behind the plate for Herrera. If I set the line at 107.5 over under for Herrera, what would you say is going to happen? Predict it. Don't just I want to know in reality what you think will happen.
I think that I think that's very possible. 108 starts, I think, is very possible. Yes.
You take the over? I will slam the under on that. I would be surprised if it's that many, which is not to say that I'll be right, but I was right last year, and I still am not convinced.
So you're again. I mean, that was injuries that went there. So
it was, but it wasn't. Like, we can look back to the first week of the season and the way that situation was being managed. And Iván Herrera was getting to the point where like his bat was showing, but he wasn't even in the game in the 9th inning because he was being replaced for defense. So that, like, the situation where I warned everybody all off season, Pedro Pagés is going to catch more than you think, was happening regardless of Herrera getting injured. And ultimately, Herrera got injured, came back, and they said, it's not really worth to do the catcher thing, but we'll try it again next year. I just am not going to be convinced for sure that it's going to happen. Could he catch 80, 90, 100 games? Absolutely. Like, I'm not saying it's going to be quite the same thing. In a truly rebuilding year, you might as well play it out for a number of months to really let it run its course. And if it works, you get the bat and the glove behind the plate in one position. That's super valuable. If it doesn't, you're a little bit closer by June, July, August of 2026 to seeing guys like Jimmy Crooks, whether he sinks or swim, or to potentially see Leonardo Bernal, who of the group is most likely the future of the position, at least until we figure out how quickly Rainiel Rodriguez can develop. I think you're just a little bit away, like a year away from really being able to thrust Bernal into an opportunity like that. You've also got Crooks sort of blocking him as a prospect, but not one that I'm convinced the Cardinals believe is the future at the position. And so you have kind of this assembly line of catchers. The only guy that just didn't make sense as part of the group was Pozo, because he wasn't the future of the position. He's not the defensive backup you're looking for. Could he be the third catcher who just hits? Yeah, maybe. But Crooks might be that as well. It's going to be an interesting dynamic to see exactly what happens. But it felt to me the only guy that I was pretty sure was still going to be here was Pagés. Crooks, if he has value, I felt could be traded because the Cardinals see down the road Bernal more likely at the future of the position, even Rodriguez even further down the road could be more likely to be the future of the position. Now, things can happen. This offseason, Jimmy Crooks could bust his ass and come into spring training, and the Cardinals could go, whoa, like, we're seeing Jimmy Crooks locked in on everything. We loved his bat, and now we're seeing him do it all. And I love the way he's taken charge in meetings, and suddenly you can reorient again. You know, there was a time where Iván Herrera was the next after Yadi, but then there was a season where they saw what it looked like for Iván Herrera at the big league level to be a catcher, and they sent him down in the middle of the season when Yadi was hurt, if I'm not mistaken on this. And I forget the gentleman's name, but he was just a veteran stopgap that they brought up just because they couldn't do it with Iván Herrera anymore at that point in time. Herrera has made a bunch of strides since then. Maybe Jimmy Crooks is going to do the same, but I just feel as though until you can realistically say, hey, this Herrera experiment is going to be successful, it makes perfect sense to kind of hold the line and have Pagés there as well. Because as much as you can say, they don't care, they're going to lose as many games as they can, and it just doesn't matter in 2026, I don't think that's actually how they view it, especially from a pitching development standpoint, where if you're just leaving the development of the pitchers to Herrera, who it may not pan out, and then Pozo is the backup plan, and you're not sure if Crooks is ready and Bernal may be another year off, I don't think they want to do that with their entire crop of young pitchers that they're hoping to begin to introduce in 2026 at various points along the way. Pagés is the anchor that makes sense to retain because, frankly, I don't think he has much trade value, which is why I said Tuesday, I think he's more valuable to the team than he would have been in a trade. Now, if somebody called and offered something, be a different story. I would just be more surprised if that had happened. Cardinals like Pedro Pagés. I think there could be a point in time where they let him go, but I don't think it's at this point in time because the people that could replace him down the road are not ready to do so yet, if that day should ever arrive.
Give us your thoughts on the Cardinals' moves from Friday, and let us know which direction you think that they are going to be heading now that they have the 40-man roster at 37 after the moves were made. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of Card Central 365, and as always, that episode will be brought to you by DraftKings, where the crown is yours. He's Brenden Schaeffer. I'm Joe Roderick. See you then.